In this video, we're going to talk about the spaces and map tabs of the CemTrax program. First, let's begin by going to the Map tab. This is the map used by the demo cemetery in CemTrax. You can see that this cemetery is divided up into several sections: the West section, the East section, Veterans, Children, and Priests. Within each section there are different blocks. So for example, if we look at the West section, we can see 4 blocks. Within each block there are several rows, and then each row contains several spaces. The reason this is pointed out is because near the top of the screen we can see our 4 levels of description for how to find a space on the map. And CemTrax keeps track of all these spaces using the same 4 levels of description. So we can see we currently have the space selected that is in the West section, block number 1, row number 1, and space number 1. On the right side of the screen we can see our legend, and it describes the colors assigned to each space in the cemetery. Here we see that the green spaces are our available ones. We also have orange for reserved spaces, yellow for restricted, a lighter blue for sold, and a darker blue for those that are sold with a burial. These 5 space statuses are included in every CemTrax license by default. You can also add additional space statuses in addition to the original 5. As you can see here, we have a 6th status available for trees. So in the cemetery we have several brown spaces where a tree is currently growing. However, the spaces are still marked on the map because that is how the cemetery was originally plotted out. We can also change the colors assigned to each space status. They do not need to remain as you see them currently on this map. If we single click on a space on the map, the top of the screen tells us some summary information about that. If we were to double click on a space, CemTrax will take us directly to the space information for that space. Now please bear in mind that I use 4 levels of description for each space. Here we have section, block, row, and space. Your cemetery may use other levels of description. You can customize CemTrax to be whatever descriptions you want. So perhaps instead of using the word space, you may use the word plot. We can easily make that change and customize it for your cemetery. Now let's go back to our map. I'm going to sell 2 spaces in the cemetery. So in block 3 and row number 2, I'm going to sell spaces 1 and 2. I will edit that space and change the status from available to sold. I'll pretend I'm entering in historical information, so I'll make this date January 1st. Of 2010, and let's say that was sold for $300. You can also track the sales agent, other amount, and other fees that go along with this sale. You may also customize the names other amount and other fees in the settings of CemTrax. These can say whatever you need them to. You can see on the right there are 5 custom fields available. You do not need to activate these fields, but I've done so for purposes of this video. You can see they are labeled custom 1, 2, and so on. You can change these labels to be whatever you want them to be in the settings of CemTrax. You do not have to activate all 5 at one time either. But I just wanted to show you this so you can see that they are available. So now we save this. And then we're also going to go to the second space. And we're going to sell this one as well. Now you may also customize the sold amount for your cemetery, so if you sell every space for $300, that amount can come up every time, so you don't have to enter it. Now, in space number 2, I'd like to know who the owner of this space is. I'm going to make it Timothy Jackson. And I'm going to go back to space number 1 because Timothy Jackson bought this one as well. Now we may also add other information to these spaces, such as care funds. And you can customize this drop-down list to be whatever care funds you need to have. By default, perpetual care is already included. And you may assign a default cost. In the demo, it is 0, but I'm going to just use a cost right now of $100. Then add that. And for permissions, who is permitted to be buried in this spot, this is also going to be Tim Jackson, the same as the owner. And since he is not yet a burial in this space, we do not see anything under the burial section. Now let's go to space number 2. As we see, Tim Jackson is already an owner here. If we go to care funds, we'll also do a perpetual care for $100. Now under permissions, we're going to add his wife, Beatrice. So now we can see that Beatrice has permission to be buried in space number 2, but if we were to look back at space number 1, that is where Timothy is permitted to be buried. This allows us to keep track of where each person should be. So now if we go to the Peoples tab and go to the owner area, we can see in our list of owners that Timothy Jackson has become an owner of a space. And in this case, he's the owner of 2 spaces. And also, if we go to our Advanced Searches tab, and this tab is covered in more detail in a later video, if we click on the permissions, we can see that Timothy Jackson and his wife Beatrice have permission to be buried in block 3, row 2, and in spaces 1 and 2. If we go back to the map, we can see now, if we click on these spaces, that our header information tells us that they are now sold, and Timothy Jackson is the owner. Click on the other one, we see the same information because he is the owner of both. Now when looking at the map, I will point out there are certain limitations that CemTrax has that other cemetery software solutions may not. I point these limitations out because they contribute greatly to the reduced costs of the CemTrax program versus the others. Others will have a much higher cost because they offer additional features. So let's look at this map and, for example, say the east section, which currently has blocks 1 and 2. Let's say that this map has about 20 blocks in the east section. We would be able to scroll to the east or to the right on the screen until we reached an area where we could view each of the 20 blocks in the east section. There are certain limitations in CemTrax that limit us to how far we can scroll in the right and left directions or up and down. So sometimes the map will need to be split onto several maps within the CemTrax program. And you can see in the navigation submenu, we currently have 1 tab where our map is. Your cemetery, if it is larger or more complex in layout, may need several tabs. I would also like to point out that the spaces on this map are in rectangular shape. These shapes may go horizontally or vertical, but they cannot be rotated at an angle. So for example, I cannot have a space rotated at a 45-degree angle. It must either go horizontally or vertically. Certain concessions may need to be made to accommodate how your map is laid out versus what you see in CemTrax. Also, the CemTrax map is not meant to be identical in scale to what you would see on a map of your cemetery, but approximations will be made to get it as close as it possibly can be. The map can also contain certain features, as are seen here in the middle, for statues and a flag that are in this cemetery. You may choose to put other things on your map, such as paths, roads, signs, etc. The map is also not able to be printed out directly from CemTrax. However, there are certain ways we can still print the map. If you choose to design your map in such a way, we can include it on a custom report that will allow us to print it out on, say, an 11 by 17 piece of paper. If this is something you'd like to do, this can be discussed before finalizing your license of CemTrax. Additional fees will apply for custom reports made for your cemetery. Also, data from CemTrax cannot be published directly online. If you do wish to put certain CemTrax information online on your own website or through some other means, we may be able to develop custom reports and accomplish that for you. If this is something you need, please feel free to discuss that with me when we talk about your license of CemTrax. While there are certain things CemTrax cannot do, such as zooming in and out of a map, they are mentioned because they are the reason the cost of the CemTrax license is so much lower than the other leaders in the cemetery software industry. When you have a cemetery software solution that has scalable, zoomable maps or has online publishing features, these contribute greatly to the cost of that software. CemTrax is designed to be an affordable solution for small to medium-sized cemeteries. It is able to contain all the data that the other leaders in the industry provide, but at a fraction of the cost. So it is up to your cemetery to decide if they want certain features such as online publishing or scalable maps, or if they want to save on the cost of cemetery software. In the next video, we will discuss burials in the CemTrax program.